Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Farming Flowers podcast. This week, I'm so excited to be able to have a conversation with Don Tipping from Siskiyou Seeds here in Oregon. And I've been trying to get him pinned down for, I think since last spring, we were going to have him on the conference that we did back in February. And I'm hoping to get him on the conference maybe coming up in March. So, but we have him for a brief amount of time today. And so we're going to talk a little bit about resilience. I'm going to have him kick it off and kind of tell us how he got started in this and a little bit of his history of maybe how he got into the farm. And he really is an amazing steward of saving seeds. And we're going to talk a little bit about some hyper locally adapted seeds and his work in that. And so, Don, I'm going to let you do a quick little introduction, and then let's start talking about what resilience means to you and how you've had that be a part of your farming.
Sure. Sounds good. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Well, I've been here in Southwestern Oregon for almost 30 years now, and I went to school at UC Davis, and not for agriculture, but got started working on organic farms my first year there, and ironically, the very first farm job I ever had after growing up in suburbia, I didn't grow up doing agriculture, was at a flower farm in Dunnigan, California, and I was harvesting globe amaranth.
Oh my gosh.
Gomphrena all day in the 105-degree Central Valley heat. And bundling it, and this was for dried flowers and wreaths and that kind of thing. And I'd never seen this plant, and so it's ironic that today we grow seed of, and actually Gomphrena is maybe one of the most difficult plants to clean the seed of I've ever encountered. So I guess I'm still in the journey.
Yep.
So now we're with Siskiyou Seeds. We started that in 2009. I grew commercial seed for other seed companies for many years, along with market vegetables and medicinal herbs. But now predominantly our focus is growing seed of vegetables, flowers, herbs, and small grains here on our home farm. And we have about 750 varieties, and some of which we contract to other growers, because that would be crazy to grow here. And continually honing in my work here on our home farm of being more of like a research and development facility for variety trials, experimenting, plant breeding, and evaluating new material. And our general rule of thumb is we don't offer seed unless we know how to grow it. And because we want to be able to stand behind our seed. And I have a team of 2 other women plus some other employees that help with seed packing that really help me do Siskiyou Seeds. So if you're a client of ours, don't give me all the credit. There's a number of they're all women that really help make it happen and keep all the spreadsheets and everything organized. But I'm realizing, one of my mentors, Larry Middleton, he had a work for Enza, which is one of the big Dutch multinational seed companies that you can't buy seed from them. But if you bought seed from any of the other big folks, you have bought seed from them. He once said that most seed companies are just paper companies. They print catalogs and packets, and they just need some floor sweepings to put in it. Because most growers, they don't know what quality seed is. Where farmers, once you have some experience, what the seed is. And this speaks to, this overarching concept of resilience that I increasingly have been coming around to this assessment that the answer to pretty much every problem, whether it's in your life, your farm, your community, the world, the nation, the state, the county, is to cultivate resilient, regenerative communities. And what that looks like is different depending on your skill sets. So for us, like my job as a seedsman would be to select, grow, improve and breed varieties that perform well under the environmental, disease, pests, climate stresses that we encounter without row covers, without extreme measures like botanical insecticides or fungicides. So while we might start some things in a greenhouse, I call it Darwinian farming. Like you just have to go out there, you got to make it. And if you don't make seed, like we're not going to go to heroic efforts. And because if we're doing an excellent job in optimizing everything at every point and we're producing the seed, then somebody else that grows the seed, then that would mean that they would need to be having optimal fertility,
Ah,
optimal climate,
right.
optimal spacing, optimal, weed control, all that. Whereas if a plant can produce seed in like good enough conditions, um, and this is kind of like Masanobu Fukuoka, like
Mm-hmm.
natural farming too, just like,
Yeah.
well, it's an ecosystem. You got to work it out.
Yeah.
We do till, we do grow transplants, we do weed, all these things, but I'm not out there picking bugs or slugs off. The ones that get annihilated, they're just not going to make seeds. And the ones that manage to produce amidst all that will thrive. So, I think that's like ecological resilience. And then there's obviously the social resilience. And for me, not having to go heroic, which I maybe
Mm-hmm.
could have done when I was younger, it makes my lifestyle and
Yeah.
keep balance more resilient. And then within the economic resilience, I look at that too of like, I'd rather for my work with seeds and farming, just do what I'm really good at or what I'm passionate about, and then pay other growers to produce seed for us so they can do, focus on stuff rather than watering it all down. So
Mm-hmm.
very much like a quality over quantity, which I think will impart resilience over the long haul because most people in the shark tank of capitalism within the gardening,
Yeah.
farming ecosystem, it's a bit of a race to the bottom, and they're just trying to
Yeah.
produce things as cheap as possible. And I won't name names of seed companies, but there's a lot of crap out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
Whereas for us, I'm like, well, it either works well for us or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, we won't offer it. For instance, okra. I only have one variety of okra. It just
Yeah.
doesn't do that well for us. So I'm not going to
Yeah.
pretend to have a lot of things for it. So
Yeah.
yeah, ongoing. It's an ongoing
Yeah.
learning
Absolutely.
experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's kind of go down that path of talking about the hyper locally adapted seeds, because I know you've really been doing a lot of selecting for things. And that's something Dawn and I were just chatting briefly before this about, you know, that was kind of how farming used to be, is that's all you
Yeah.
had. You saved your seeds and you selected the things that thrived. And so let's kind of talk about that whole concept a little bit, because I'm not sure everybody knows that that's even something that's available to them. I think the capitalism mindset is, just every year we get all these beautiful seed catalogs, and we go crazy and just buy all of these seeds from all over. And I think as a part of building a resilient farm, maybe change your mindset a little bit into how you can be in control of your own seed library and not necessarily rely on all these companies that where the seed is coming from very
Mhm.
few big companies, and they're controlling all that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Well, at the starting from the beginning, really, seed saving, I would say, was the defining moment of civilization, even more than
mm,
fire or the wheel or anything.
hmm
Because at that point, people settled down into agricultural
right.
villages and that kind of thing. Even though for thousands of years, people, I think, augmented their diet with a lot of wild harvested
Right.
food, herbs and stuff. So until 1835, when the William Atlee Burpee Seed Company started, there were no seed companies. So unless you were saving seed or you had people in your rural village that saved seed, you weren't growing anything.
Yeah.
So, we've come so far from that. Um, and then, to jump forward a whole bunch, I just wrote an article for the Homestead Living magazine. Melissa Norris, if you're not familiar with
hmm
her, is
Yeah.
definitely worth checking out. She's got a bunch of amazing content and collaborators. But basically, we've been talking about like, wouldn't it be cool if we had a map of the US as some kind of digital thing and you could hover the cursor over and figure out where is your regional seed company? So let's say
Ah,
somebody emails us from Washington. I'm going to say, oh, don't get seed from us, get seed from Uprising Seed. Or
yeah.
there's a variety of other small, just not even on the map, so to speak,
hmm
folks. And you look at here, so many people just get seed from Johnny's, High
Right.
Mowing,
Yep.
Geo, Glockner,
Yep.
Stokes, whoever it is.
Yep.
And a lot of those are sourcing their seed. I remember the buyer from Johnny's was at a barbecue out here probably 15 years ago because a bunch of us were growing heirloom tomato seed for Johnny's
hmm
on contract. And he admitted that 70% of the seeds in the Johnny's catalog were coming from China back
Ah,
then.
Wow.
So those 15 years ago. So those aren't adapted to your area. And it's
Nope.
not always about the radius from where you are growing, but more a climate analog. So like here where we are in southwestern Oregon, I say we're in a winter rainforest, summer desert. We get 42 inches of rain a year,
Mm.
but pretty much no rain. So June 1st to about October 1st
Hmm.
in a typical year. So we have basically a summer desert. Obviously, we're providing irrigation, and then your latitude. So like that rainfall pattern, when is it hot, cold? And then we have, because we're in a summer desert, our nights are cold. That's a
Right.
very different environment than being in the upper Midwest or
Yeah.
the east in the Mississippi, where you have warm nights where things are growing
Hmm.
quickly at night. Where here it's cold, things just shut down. So I think finding someone who's a similar area, like for instance, I would say somebody growing in Colorado
Hmm.
has a more similar growing environment to where I live than northwestern Washington, which
Right.
even though geographically that's closer to us, and you might say, oh, it's Pacific Northwest, but there,
Right.
85 degrees is a hot day.
Yeah.
Where for us, 85, you're wearing a hoodie in the summer. Um, so, the plants adapt to that. There's no way around it. And I think this gets into you have two choices. And I would say modern agriculture has already chosen one. It pretty
Hmm.
much chose that post World War II, which
Hmm.
is crop supports. So,
Hmm.
heavy duty fertilizers, insecticides,
Yep.
fungicides, all that kind of stuff. And increasingly greenhouses. We've all seen hopefully images from space of like along the Mediterranean coast of Spain, like just
Yeah.
miles and miles of greenhouses, or I guess they would say kilometers and kilometers
Yeah.
to produce food. Or you could work within the genetics of the seed, so that you basically are affecting adaptation externally,
Mhm.
changing the growing environment, which is always one of your tools you have, or changing it from within the variety. So if you think back to like agriculture was all direct seeded, nobody really grew
Right.
transplants.
Right.
So, you only grew that which you could direct seed. Nowadays, a lot of us, we can do both. We direct seed and can grow starts. And then, for anybody listening who's interested in like, okay, I want to take control a little bit more of some of these varieties, I always encourage people choose two varieties, one species. Every species has different seed saving rules and different, pollination rules. So choose one that's cross-pollinated, like a zinnia or a
Mhm.
marigold or a cosmos or something like this, and then one that's self-pollinated
Okay.
that you don't have to worry about it crossing. Because if let's say you choose zinnias, you want to save seed, that means you can only grow one.
Yeah.
Or you grow a mix and you're selecting within that mix.
Yeah.
And within selection of trying to adapt a variety to your area, just the pure act of saving seed, it's going to be adapting to your area, but it's going to be more slow because the plants that do better are going to make more flowers, more fruits, whatever, and produce more seed. Where the plants that get diseased, fall over,
Yeah.
get eaten by pests, they die. They don't make any
Yeah.
seed. So
True.
their progeny aren't represented. However, you can really accelerate this process through what's called selection. And there's two pathways. There's negative selection pressure. So let's say you have a 50-foot bed, we'll just use zinnias, and let's say it's a mix and you don't like pale pink. Sorry, I'm going to pick on pale
Yeah.
pink for a minute because that's what's dominant in zinnias. So you can go through and rip out the plants that are pale pink and then
Hmm.
steer the population in the direction of what you want.
Hmm.
Or let's say you really like doubled flowers, or highly doubled.
Yeah.
So you go through and literally rip out all the plants that are single petaled, which if you just leave it to its own desires, like in zinnia or any of the Asteraceae, the plants that just make single petals are going to produce a lot more seed because they're actually better for pollinators to
Ah.
get in there. But that highly doubled trait of like a
Hmm.
queen lime mix,
Hmm.
it doesn't leave any room for the pollinators to get in there. But that's what
Right.
so those ones are going to
Ah.
speed. So that's negative selection pressure, removing, you know,
Hmm.
positive selection pressure. And I tend to do more of this is I'll take some either uh, painter's tape, like the blue
Yeah.
painter's tape uh, or just surveying ribbon. And I'll go through and mark my favorite 20 to 100 plants.
Yeah.
And then those are the ones I save seed from. They're still cross pollinating with all the rest, but you're getting the best of the best from that. So you could do both, but I think it's important just to consider those are two dials that you have control of. And that applies to pretty much any plant, whether it's corn, or mustard or onions, anything. You could choose those two approaches. Um, I think that the negative selection pressure we call roguing. It's removing plants. Uh, and that's valuable, like back to zinnias, for instance, like powdery mildew can be an issue on the
Right.
foliage and can really affect the health of the plant. So for
Right.
selecting for plants that are resistant to that, and that brings up one of my mentors, Dr. John Navazio, who was a PhD plant breeder, worked with a lot of different crops, said plant breeding is kind of like juggling. We can all juggle one ball, like let's say color in a
Yeah.
flower. If we go for two, let's say color and height, that's two balls. A lot of us can do that. Three, anybody can learn to juggle three balls if you give them enough time. Then we're
Yeah.
adding like single petaled or double petaled.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start moving to 4, 5, 6, powdery mildew
Oh
resistant,
yeah.
height, other nuances, that becomes more difficult because then it's trade-offs. And then you need more total plants because it becomes a numbers game
Ah,
to
okay.
maintain the genetic breadth of the population to move forward. So, I encourage everybody like back to the, pick two that you're going to save seed and maybe
Mm-hmm.
make yourself your cross-pollinated one really easy, something like cilantro.
Yeah.
You're only going to grow one variety of cilantro, so you don't
Right.
have to worry about crossing.
Right.
Um, and then the plants will teach you over time because planting seed from what you saved, you learn so much. And then eventually, after you do this for a few years, plant your seed next to commercially available seed and you'll learn a lot.
Ooh.
And we do that with
Okay.
trials and we'll grow, like we did a big onion trial this year. We grew 25 varieties, 50 plants each, half hybrids, half open pollinated, and all the open pollinated were our varieties. And the hybrids weren't better.
Oh,
So we have
interesting.
data of like what we're doing works. And one
Yeah.
thing John Navazio had said for years is like open pollinated varieties can be every bit as good as hybrids, but there's no economic incentive within our
Mm-hmm.
marketplace to capture paying for the work of doing the selection. You don't even need to get into fancy like crossing things, plant breeding,
Mm-hmm.
but just selection is plant breeding. Whereas the hybrids, if you've ever noticed, they sell hybrid seed by the thousand,
Yeah.
open pollinated seed by the gram or the ounce. And
Yeah.
that way you don't compare the fact that the hybrid seed is always more. Because it's going to be, how do you pay for the plant breeding?
Wow.
So, that's a tricky thing. And I think
Interesting.
like as we talk about resilience, and we talked about this a moment ago, I think we should have way more like specialty flower farmer, or florist farmer saving seed of some things and having
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy to do that. Well, not really easy, but it's not that hard. And then have some seed that's unique to you, and you can include that in some special wedding swag. Or
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of ways to like bolster your bottom line through diversifying, and then even having varieties that you have bred that you get to name and you
Mm-hmm.
are the bespoke source for.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll kind of wrap up this little bit with another quote from my friend Larry Middleton. The seed companies, if they want to sell seed, they say two things. They say it's new. So think
Yeah.
what's on the cover of every
Oh
seed pack,
yeah.
new, or there's not much left,
Oh
limited
yes.
quantities. So if you have some special thing that you've bred or developed and you give it a name and maybe you develop a little like, local fan base for that, is great advertising for
Yeah,
your
true.
unique artistic work.
Very true. And that
Yeah.
does help with building resilience on your farm too, because that does give you a whole other income stream, certainly, but some other talking point than, just farming flowers. I mean,
Yeah.
that gives you something else. When you were talking about selecting, are there, would you say there are certain kind of traits that if someone wants to start kind of doing this maybe negative or positive, whatever selection, are there certain traits that would be, I mean, I guess it would be different for every person, but are there ones that you should try to look for first? I mean, pest resistance or cold tolerance or
I think it all depends on the species. That's one thing is you have to really learn about each species.
Mm,
And,
okay.
the flower world is a little odd because it's the intersection between horticulture and fashion. So, like
True.
me, myself, I like the bold colors, the pale colors I could care less about. However, as of late, it seems like pale colors or that like white green wedding palette
Oh, yes. Oh
seems to
my
be popular. So
gosh.
having like big, bold white flowers
Yeah,
is trendy, but the trend's going to be different next year.
true.
So you could follow trends and you'll make money that year, or just find what I think you're going to be most successful with what you're passionate about.
Okay.
And I remember, like, for instance, the first time I grew the cactus mix,
Mm-hmm.
which was a long time ago. I grew it, I think, a commercial contract for Seeds of Change. I'd never grown it before. I'm like, wow, these are cool. There's a lot of variation in
Yeah.
here. And I've been selecting using like the organza bags. I know like
Mm-hmm.
growers and stuff,
Yeah.
single plant selections, which you're not supposed to do, but you can, so like as Miles Davis said, you have to learn how to play inside before you play outside. So
Yeah.
to play the melody before you go all improv
Yeah.
and begin to find unique variants because there's a lot of stuff, and we can see that with dahlias. It's
Yeah.
57,000 named cultivars of dahlias.
Yeah. It's so
But to go
crazy.
from a seed grown dahlia to like a dinner plate is a long journey. And that's where, if you want to get into this, you got to be passionate because you're not going to have any overnight successes. It's going to
Yeah.
be, I'd say, minimum 4 to 5 years of working on something before you really see substantial improvement or stability. Like a case in point would be out of that, cactus mix zinnia, I've been teasing out these ones with various petal shapes that I find intriguing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
really know or care if people find them interesting. If they buy
Yeah.
them, great. There was one where the petals like are it rolled in on themselves. That's called involute, but they're also what's called fimbriated, meaning they don't terminate in a point, but they kind of splay out like a frayed end
Ah.
of a string. And
Yeah.
then I don't know the botanical term. I don't think there is one of squiggly petals where they're like wiggly. And so I selected this from a few single plant collections out of like an intentional like gene pool of like going into the cactus mix, saving my 100 favorite plants. Do that
Mm-hmm.
3 times, so you get out all the ones that aren't that great.
Yeah.
And I've been teasing out this one. And so I just produced a seed crop of it, just like a 50-foot bed with 3 rows on it. So like 150 plants. And it's already stable after 3 iterations. I call orange anemone, and they look like a sea anemone. They're so unique.
Wow.
Where most people, if I were to show them and they didn't really know, they're like, is that a dahlia or is that a
Oh,
chrysanthemum?
interesting.
They don't even recognize it as a zinnia because, again, within the
Wow.
Asteraceae is this infinite
Yeah.
diversity. So I think finding those ones that really light you up is valuable. Um, and and I think there's, as we've just crossed over this Halloween, Dia de los
Yeah.
Muertos time,
Yeah.
who's doing the cool work with marigolds these days?
Yeah.
Who has like the coolest, most fluffy,
Mm-hmm.
least powdery mildew resistant, tallest, earliest flower, whatever the traits you want. And I don't really know anyone. One of my mentors who's passed away a few years ago, Dr. Alan Capular, used to work with marigolds, and he had ones that grow 6 feet tall, all these
Wow.
crazy things. From
Oh,
letting them cross and then selecting out of crosses. If you want to start with a plant breeding, just do that.
yeah.
Get all the Crayola crayon colors, and you're
Yeah.
going to be able, you mix them all, and you are able to make the coolest things. But I don't know anybody doing marigold stuff.
Hmm,
And when
yeah.
I look at Instagram, it's so trendy right now. Everybody
Yeah.
wants like cool marigold. So like
Right.
there's a niche. I don't see it in the seed catalogs. I don't see
No,
it
that's
in
true.
Floret. They're like
Nope.
Floret is left, marigolds off to the side.
Yeah.
Huge opportunity there. And not only for, bouquets, but
Mm-hmm.
also for the dried garlands that could be a
Right.
secondary product that you could send out online as a value
Yeah.
product. So, there's an idea. And I think just find like what you're passionate about. And that's kind of like ikigai, that Japanese term
Yeah.
of the Venn diagram of like what the world needs, what you can get paid for, what you're
Yeah.
passionate about, and I can't remember the other one, but
Yeah.
I think that applies to plant breeding and seed saving and adaptation
Yeah.
a lot, because as our climate changes, like we need flexibility, and that's something like I try not to be too narrowly focused, and that's why I just call it Darwinian farming, because there's a lot of
Hmm.
adaptation things that are what are called polygenic. It's multiple genes that confer, whether it's disease resistance like a powdery mildew or something. So like a taller marigold, for instance,
Hmm.
is going to have more airflow than a
Yeah.
shorter marigold. So you're less likely to get a fungal pathogen, which powdery
Yeah.
mildew is a fungal pathogen, than a short one where dew can hang out
Right.
in that tight plant. So you just have to pick like a couple species and just learn. The plants will teach you.
Hmm.
And that's one thing I think seed saving teaches you much more than, market farming,
Yeah.
does, because you're just you're with the plant for a longer portion of its
True.
life cycle, and you're paying attention more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You're having an intimate relationship with it because if it is something you're focused on, you're going to be checking it, every day and multiple times a day. And yeah, it is definitely a relationship that you're building with that particular plant or
yeah.
plants within a row. So, oh, that's so fascinating. So you mentioned marigolds. Are there any other good, easy starter plants you could recommend for someone to experiment with?
You know, um, just because we just pulled him the other day, my nephew's visiting from England with his buddy, and we had Stargazer Dahlia mix. We were producing for seed, so we like dug up all the tubers.
Hmm.
And I think, when you look how popular dahlias are in the cultural just
Oh
salt,
yeah.
and the
Yeah.
fact that you can get a packet of seed from us or Wild Garden Seed or any of these folks and grow 100 plants for $5
Yeah. True.
and dig them up from the tubers. And the second year plants, like, so what we're doing, we dug all the tubers and we're going to divide them, and then we'll put them
Hmm.
in gallon pots, once they're cured,
Hmm.
and we'll sell those at the market early in the season. I was like, hey, here's a dahlia in a pot for $10.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
already growing, so you can say you can't grow dahlias. Um,
Right.
that would be an interesting thing. And I know like the Floret crew has been doing a little bit of that work, but
Hmm.
finding, if you're not familiar with the work of the Culinary Breeders Network, Lane Selman in Portland, she's
Hmm.
working pretty much just in vegetables, but she's trying to uplift the unsung or future heroes like Radicchio, or just this
Okay.
past weekend, I went to a quince festival.
Wow.
And, so it's going to be really hard for you to make a splash with sunflowers
Yeah,
because the
true.
commercial industry is already there.
Right.
So what are the, gazania, or what are the weird ones that,
Yeah.
could you breed a, schizanthus, that like corn
Yeah.
orchid, like,
Yeah.
could you breed one to be bigger?
Yeah.
Like bigger
Interesting.
flowers. Like, I
Right.
don't know. Like nobody's done this work. And I
Right.
think working in, a niche that's not overly saturated already.
Hmm. Hmm.
Zinnias is saturated. Like
Oh yeah.
but even then I'm finding things nobody's done this. Um, or getting, let's say, some of the heritage grains, let's say some of the like weird multicolored barleys,
Oh yeah.
of these Tibetan purple barleys and that kind of thing. They
Yeah.
work so well in like minimalist bouquets or
Right.
wreaths, and adapting these to your area and having seed available because they're so versatile, and especially the
Hmm.
ones you can dry.
Hmm.
We're seeing some things like straw flower. I don't think they've ever gone on a fashion, but I'm definitely noticing
No. Oh, they're back.
increase in
Oh yeah.
the interest in everlastings.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
I
back.
think there's a lot of opportunity in celosia. I have a mix. And that's one thing I tend to do a lot is I'll create mixes that I'm really
Hmm.
hoping other people will take and breed out of these mixes because I don't have enough time
Yeah.
installation plots.
Right. Right.
So like for instance, the zinnia, I have one called Tide Pool Mix, which is all my favorites. We sell
Ah.
out every year that I produce seed, but it's all my favorites intermating.
Oh,
So if you
interesting.
wanted to create like, I don't know, some weird pale yellow
Yeah.
wiggly petaled thing. But I do think the unsung heroes would be useful. And then one thing I noticed a difference between vegetable seed and flower seed is like within vegetable seed, it's maybe like 35 species we work within. I mean,
Hmm.
think about it. It's like cucumbers, squash,
Yeah.
tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, like
Yeah.
carrots. How many are there?
It's not a lot.
Flowers, it's infinite. It's crazy. We go everything from like echinops,
That's
globe
true.
thistle to, ornamental corns.
Right.
Um, so if you can't come up with one of those that's interesting to you, you're just not
Yeah.
trying hard enough,
Yeah.
I think. So
Oh, this is so fascinating and so much fun to think about. I love the idea of doing the dahlia mix, and I've done a couple of packets over the years of, the double mix, and rarely do I get an actual double dahlia out of any of those, but it's fun to see what comes out of it.
yeah,
There haven't really been any that I've wanted to save the tuber for because they end up being usually just that highlighter yellow with just a single
exactly.
kind of, I mean, there's a place for those, I suppose, but there's not a whole lot I can do with those in in bouquets. They're just so obnoxious.
Right. But here's the plants teaching you, like you're learning what is dominant in
Yeah,
the dahlia genome
absolutely. Yep.
is yellow for sure.
Highlighter yellow.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess we're probably going to have to wrap up here pretty quickly. I wanted to ask you just kind of a question on maybe what you're most hopeful about if you're thinking about sort of the future of seed saving and people building their own resilience and their own resilience within their farms. Do you have, some hope that
Yeah.
we're headed the
But,
right direction?
for us here at Siskiyou Seeds, like our North Star is that we become irrelevant.
I
And
love that.
because seed companies were for the vast arc of human history.
Yeah.
So I'm really encouraged. I've been teaching a program I call the Seed Academy at my place for
Hmm.
13 years. Basically, teaching people all our secrets of how do we do what we do,
Hmm.
including running the business and our unique niche and how, what it takes. And so that's encouraging, is seeing the proliferation of small bioregional seed companies, because we
Hmm.
really do need that everywhere. And I see more and more people getting involved in it. And the cool thing in the seed trade that's different, let's say in your, like where you live, a couple of flower farmers pop up, your first gut reaction is probably not enthusiasm. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you're cutting into my marketplace. But for
Right.
me, my main marketplace is the internet,
Yeah.
which is very wide. And
Right.
in one of the ways I look at this, and when I had interns on my farm, I would ask people like, okay, what kind of music were you in, or what was your clique you were in high school? Were you a preppy, a punk, whatever
Yeah.
archetype? Because how you describe what the work you do is going to be informed by that. Whether you're into the pale pastel colors or the bright technicolors,
True.
or uniformity or whatever that. And there'll be people, and I'll just close with this because I've been doing this entrepreneurial mentorship with the library in a local, like, kind of regenerative economy group. There's a book called The Compass and the Nail that was written by the marketing director for Patagonia.
Mm.
He came up with this idea that it's been unshakable ever since I read it. It's called your story universe. Like, what is the story within your, like, made up universe? Because we all operate from
Yeah.
some, like, little kid fantasy,
Right.
whether we want to admit it or not. We want the rest of the
Absolutely.
world to cohere to our
Hmm.
story universe. So whatever it is you do, that's kind of what your job is. Like, don't just follow the trends you see on social
Hmm.
media
Hmm.
or within your given, affinity group, but stay true to that which is yours, and
Hmm.
kind of stick with it. So, like a bunch of my breeding projects in my zinnia line all have names from the Electric Mayhem band from Sesame Street.
Oh,
Chief,
cool.
Janice,
I
like
love it.
Animal. So over
Yeah.
time I'll be releasing those. They'll only make sense to people of that generation.
Yeah.
Younger people,
Right.
they just would be like, what's Dr. Teeth?
True.
So, and I don't really care, because ultimately at the end of the day, I think that poetic story universe thing
Yeah.
helps guide us and give us a reason to keep doing this work,
Yeah.
instead of like, what's best for my bottom line or this kind of thing.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Wow. Well, fun, fun, fun. This has been such a great conversation, and I have so many
likewise.
more questions. I'm not going to hammer port on with today, but just such a fascinating project you have going down there. So I will put the link to Siskiyou Seeds in the show notes, and he's doing some really fun, interesting things with flowers too. You do have a few flowers that you have in your catalog too. So
120 varieties.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you have an unusual climate like he does, we're in Central Oregon, so we're in the high desert, and we have our own weird little microclimate here, especially even at my farm. And like my growing season can tend to sometimes be 45 to 50 days some years. It's brutal, but I mean, I think now I'm on a quest to really start selecting for some things because I actually, oddly enough, maybe you have some information on this. So I started overwintering my dahlias in one of my high tunnels last year, and they were just in a raised bed, and I didn't have any place to store my shade cloth that I took off my tunnel, so the shade cloth just got piled up on that bed, and so it was super well insulated over the winter. So those dahlias, I wasn't sure if they were going to make it because we get really cold here.
Yeah.
And they didn't get any water, obviously, during that whole winter. So I take everything off in the spring, and lo and behold, every one of those dahlia tubers survived and grew. And we started having frost August 8th, and then we had a stretch of fairly warm weather. But then I started having pretty frequent nights in the 20s, even down to 24. And these dahlias did not even show any sign of like brown leaves or anything. So I was thinking, is it possible that they can genetically sort of adapt to a space and become more cold tolerant? Is that even possible? I wouldn't imagine it would happen in like one generation of, or one season of being overwintered, but it took probably 2 full weeks of us being in the mid 20s for them to eventually all start kind of just browning. And I was even still getting blooms during those nights, getting down in the 20s, which is perplexing. I've reached out to several people and nobody has any explanation for that. So I don't know, but I'm fascinated now. So
yeah.
So maybe I will experiment with those, take some of the, maybe divide some of those tubers next year and put some of those outside and see how they do with cold temps outside. So, well, thank you so much for your time, Dawn. It's been such a delight to chat with you. And well, I'll put all the info down if you want to go check out his website. He's got a lot of really amazing seeds. So, all right. Well, sounds good. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll be back hopefully next week with another episode on building some resilience. Thanks so much. Bye.